Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to our discussion on the arguably complex topic of defining sustainability. My name is Laura Moody, and I'm the Executive Director at the Institute for Feed Education and Research. Today, we're hosting this webinar in coordination with the Context Network. Next slide, please. Together, we're going to be launching a project to inventory and assess the animal feed and pet food industry sustainability needs to develop a strategy and resources to support the industry. iFeeder's mission is to advance the understanding and trust in a sustainable animal feed and pet food supply chain through timely research and education. The Sustainability Roadmap project with the Context Network is one piece of the sustainability puzzle iFeeder is pursuing with the Animal Feed Industry Association and its membership. Specifically, the Sustainable Roadmap is going to help us assess industry and stakeholder research, communication, engagement, and toolkit needs, perform meta-analysis of existing animal food system data sets, identify practical, actionable items for members to advance sustainability with the intention of developing a roadmap for the industry around sustainability resource and tools. I'm now going to turn it over to Matt Sutton-Vermillion, principal at the Context Network, where he's going to provide us some background on the complex definition of sustainability that will provide context for his upcoming conversation with Dr. Kim Stackhouse-Lawson, Director of Ag Next at the Colorado State University. Take it away, Matt.
Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you and your guests today as we talk about this fun topic of defining sustainability. Some could talk about it as a dream, others talk about it as a nightmare. And what we're trying to do is to be able to frame things easily for you and your members to be able to think about a discussion that you can and you want to be able to have in the future. When somebody that's important to you comes up and asks you for your organization's definition of sustainable feed. And even if that hasn't happened today, but if you think about it tomorrow and the next day and years in the future and how important your answer is to them, how do you want to really be able to answer that question? And how do you want to really be able to demonstrate proof to increase your confidence and trust in you as a supplier in their food supply chain? So that's what we're hoping to get towards through this project. Next slide, please. Now, William Shakespeare never said this, but if he did, and if we had some fun and thought about this of defining sustainable feed or not defining sustainable feed and how you could answer that question, that's just the fun side of this. And if we think about how we could frame that, and as you click on that next build for me, please and thank you, yeah. You could do nothing and don't worry about this and just answer the question, we don't have a definition for sustainable feed. Or you could work real hard and you could define it and put some real tough things around it and shape it so that you own that definition. And that you as a member and all of the other members in the feed supply chain that are involved with iFeeder and AFIA, if you could do that with a unified voice, what would that look and sound like? Or you could use something in between like message management and talk about how sustainable feed is defined and managed by individual supply chains to deliver continuous improvement and impacts that are most important to them. You could take that ground and be able to move and pivot with it very efficiently and very effectively. But again, we aren't trying to decide that today. We're just trying to open up your thoughts around how you can decide it in the future of this project. Michigan State University has spoken about there being over 500 working definitions for sustainability. In the next 72 slides, we're going to go over all 500. I'm just kidding. We are not going to. But we're just bringing forward a few examples for you, and we aren't even going to speak directly to them, but we are making them available so that you can see them. We also have another document built out that you can get from Laura that brings them to life and brings you the links so that could be helpful. But again, it's most important, just like if you put on a jacket or if you put on something that you want to feel good about with your family and friends, that it fits you and your organization. So when you think about defining sustainability, make sure it fits and that you're comfortable in any place that you go and wearing that, so that it's really part of you and your culture. Next slide. There's a systems way of thinking about tough issues, and it's called the wicked problem theory, and it's back from the 60s. It's a social science systematic way of approaching things. And as you can see in those top 4 issues, these wicked problems are defined as problems that are complex and ill-formulated. The information is confusing. There are a lot of clients and decision makers with conflicting values, and the ramifications across the whole system are really challenging and confusing. I don't know of many things that fit this definition better than sustainability. And if you compare and contrast in that chart at the bottom of this around tame problems or wicked problems, where defining a tame problem is very easy, it's clear, that outcomes or that you can solve a tame problem or it's unsolved. And we know that's not the case when it comes to wicked problems. Shared values are in tame problems, they're widely shared, but there are wide divisions in wicked problems. And the objectivity is easy in tame problems versus highly. So it's easy to go through these things and to think about including the cause and effect and how clear or unclear it is in the case of a wicked problem. So it's easy to see sustainability and the definition of sustainable feed. It's a wicked problem, and you shouldn't try and solve it with trivial discussions. You should be really thoughtful, and of course you will be throughout this process. Next slide. Another model that you could consider is the model that puts the economic heart of an issue at its center, and it thinks about how it is surrounded by society, and that society creates pressures and opportunities associated with that economic engine. And so think of your own organization as an economic engine in your community, as an economic engine within your supply chain of the US and of the greater global economy. And then think about how you're surrounded in society and as a whole in the planet, and the environmental and ecological impacts that you have. And so you think about this as a systems approach to environmental stewardship that leaves the planet in a better place for the next generation. That's just another model that you could consider. But let's move on to some fun stuff. And we have the good fortune of having Dr. Kim Stackhouse Lawson with us. Kim did tremendous work in her early days in academia when studying at UC Davis, and then moved beyond that to doing some tremendous work for the National Cattlemen Beef Association, and the tremendous efforts that she helped lead and guide. And then moving on to leadership at JBS and their sustainability challenges on a global basis. And now she has the good fortune or Colorado State has the good fortune of having Dr. Stackhouse Lawson lead as director of their AgNext group. Kim, we're really pleased to have you and appreciate your joining us to help AFIA and iFeeder and the members think about sustainability and defining sustainability.
Sure, thanks for having me, Matt.
You know, when you think about what you do today, how do you think about defining sustainability in the role that you play today within our industries?
Yeah, so I don't think that's changed for me over time. And for me, it's really balancing those environmental, social, and economic pillars and always striving for continuous improvement. And I think that that's something that's really ingrained in agriculture, that it's a part of who we are and a culture to really continue to always be better. And then I think it's equally ingrained in our culture to balance those very important and dynamic aspects of sustainability. The one thing I'll say though, Matt, and I liked your comments around this as well, is that sustainability is, I agree, a wicked challenge. And one of the reasons that it is a wicked problem is because it's a unique area where emotion and science are very much on equal footing. And oftentimes, an answer that we might have from a scientific perspective may not be welcome, or it may not be heard, or it may not be acceptable because of somebody's emotions around a topic or somebody's really innate kind of deep-seated beliefs or ethical perspective around a topic. And so sustainability is one of these challenging spaces where we have emotion and science on equal footing. We also, as you mentioned, everybody has a different definition of sustainability, and it ranges oftentimes from climate change to ethical business practices. And so it is an area that I think absolutely requires ownership, and it requires that ownership at that very kind of fundamental definition level, like you were discussing.
I was hoping that you'd just have a quick fix and that we could all end this early and make it easier on us all. So I guess that's not going to be the case. But when you think about best practices that iFeeder and Lara and her team can think about, and the industry can think about as they move forward in creating their sustainability roadmap, as Lara mentioned, what are some of the best practices that you can think of that relate to the definition of sustainability and the success of the project?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that I would encourage AFIA, IA, and iFeeders to do. The first is that other industries and other companies are quite a bit further ahead along their sort of sustainability journey, and that's not bad or good, but I think it does it would push me to recommend a more proactive strategy rather than a defensive strategy. And so what we've seen historically is, and these are from now older programs, sort of the first thing they did was look back in time, and they said, let's benchmark where we have come. And that's a wonderful exercise. It teaches you a lot about where you've been, what practices you may have implemented. But a con to that, especially right now, is that it takes quite a bit of time to look backwards in time, and it doesn't solve any problems today. And right now we are in a pivotal time in the sustainability space where I truly believe we need to shift from a defensive stance to a proactive stance and really take ownership of that narrative, the sustainability narrative, and to help really define that, not just for our industry, but for our consumers and our stakeholders who are asking questions of us, right? What does this mean, and how are you making progress? The other thing I would strongly encourage is a focus on climate. And while I sort of started my statements out saying that I'm a firm believer in a balanced approach to sustainability, climate change is the #1 issue that we have today. And right now that space is moving very, very fast. So I've been doing this but longer than 20 years as my actual day job professional career, and I've never seen the sustainability space move faster. So right now, weeks matter. And the reason weeks matter is because that's how fast climate change is moving. So either policy or narrative or examples of climate change, right? When we're talking about, you just think of, the last 2 weeks. This webinar is taken August 30th for those of you who are listening. But just think about what's happened the last 2 weeks in terms of weather patterns that we've seen in the United States. 2 weeks ago, the International Panel on Climate Change released their new report. It's inevitable that we're going to see 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees C warming. And they're not calling for a net zero strategy, right, where we would be sequestering as much as we're emitting. They're calling for a no CO2 emission strategy, and that's the only way that we are going to, really prevent catastrophe. So, I think right now I would never prescribe. 6 months ago, I would have never prescribed an organization actually take on, not take on, but to really I would say, own one part of definition in the way I am encouraging you today to do. But I think if you are not, if climate change is not a part of your sustainability strategy, then it would be perceived as quite tone deaf and maybe even perceived as greenwashing. So I'm just encouraging you more to say it's, you know, it's a wicked challenge. We need to be proactive, look forward, address climate change head on. It is the issue of the day, and I think it's going to be for the foreseeable future. And then the next thing I would say, Matt, is to build these programs from the ground up. So you said that a little bit. Your analogy was, you know, put on a jacket that you're comfortable wearing. I tend to agree. Absolutely. Own this big audacious word with measures and metrics that are meaningful to you and that will drive change in your industry and in your business, and that are win-win strategies, because that's really what sustainability is about, right? It's about enhancing the resiliency of supply chains. It's about being forward-looking, meeting our consumer where they're at, and really, you know, driving to what continuous improvement looks like in those three pillars.
Really appreciate your leadership and the positive, proactive attitude that you bring, Doc. What I heard loud and clear is that a really smart lady a long time ago told me in this space that either you are going to manage this issue or it is going to manage you. And so that's the essence of what I heard in very precise terms from you. I really appreciate it and want to thank you very much for helping with your contribution. Laura, are there any questions that you have for Dr. Stackhouse-Lawson?
The question that was just coming to my mind was, when you think about sustainability within the food supply chain, the food supply chain can be very narrow or it can be very broad. And so how do you know, how do all people feel involved? Is, you know, what is the place for everyone? How wide does the landscape look when we're looking at the food supply chain and folks who can contribute to the broader sustainability efforts that we're dealing with?
Yeah, great question. So I think everybody can own sustainability. And I think we're starting to see that really transpire through the larger food system. But my next point will be that it is a big food system, a big, gnarly, wicked, fun, but really complicated food system. And we're all really intricately connected. And so I'll take you back to the JBS days when we started the sustainability program there, and it really started in the plants. And it started with me benchmarking some data and saying, okay, so we're going to set a 5-year goal, and what do you want that goal to be, right? And those plants set their own goal, and yes, they're big plants, of course, but in the big scheme of the supply chain, they're small, right? They're really small. And yet we had plants that saved 1 million gallons of water a day. And is it even a blip on the, you know, water footprint of beef? No, it's not a blip. But that meant something, right? That meant something to that plant. That meant something to that community. It darn sure meant something to our company. Can you imagine the water savings? 1 million gallons of water a day, right? And at the end of the day, enough plants do that. There were 10 JBS plants that implemented the best practice that one plant figured out. Now you're starting to actually make some progress, right? Maybe it's not a blip. Maybe it's not a blip in the big water footprint of beef because of, you know, most of the water footprint of beef is coming from irrigation of feed crops and whatnot. But gosh darn it, it might be a blip if you're thinking about, you know, I don't know, the water footprint of tallow or something smaller, right? That might be a little bit more refined. So, you know, I'm pretty passionate about, it takes all of us. It takes all of us kind of moving in the same direction, singing from the same sheet of music to own the topic, because it is emotional and hard and complicated. but it also takes all of us doing a better job with our finite resources, because we know, right? We know water is limited. We know we're all worried about that. We know that we're seeing extreme weather events that we've never seen before. We're worried about that. Food production will be impacted before anything else is impacted by those finite resources. And so it really is going to take everybody working together, Laura, to make a difference. And it doesn't matter what part of the supply chain you're in.
Yeah, thanks. Do you feel like the feed industry has more to contribute than they may have yet in the animal protein sustainability discussion? And what do you think, what are the areas that there is potential?
Yeah, so I think when we think about animal protein, it depends on the protein, but in some proteins like pork and chicken, feed is the largest footprint of that overall system in terms of resources used. Beef is a little bit different, right? Because beef is predominantly raised on extensive rangeland environments, so the amount of pounds that come from those extensive rangelands is much greater than the pounds of beef that come from a feed yard. So sure, absolutely. And I think when we think about opportunities from a feed standpoint, farmers have done an incredible job continuing to innovate. When we conducted the first life cycle assessment of beef, I think I thought about the number of innovative practices that farmers were able to implement, and they're able to implement them sometimes much faster than beef producers, right? Because of the length of a gestation period of a cow, for example, right? There's just not a lot of huge change from a genetic efficiency standpoint that a rancher can implement, because that cow lives for a long time. But a farmer can implement strategies really, really quickly. And there's incredible innovations, right? From seed to irrigation to farming practice. And it's awesome. I mean, the amount of progress farmers can make in such a short time is incredible. I think there's incredible opportunity to also become a part of the climate solution. And I think looking at the ability to sequester carbon in these crop soils or cropping soils through better management is huge. I'm really interested in water holding capacity and how that links to soil organic carbon. The other thing that I think there's incredible potential around, and I said focus on climate because it's the number one sustainability issue of today, but the number two sustainability issue today is food security. And I'm really excited about cropping systems and the integration of grazing and livestock species into those cropping systems. We do a lot of that in some parts of the world. Where I live here in Weld County, we do a lot of livestock grazing into corn stalks and even cover crops. Oklahoma, has winter wheat where everything is grazed, but I think there's incredible opportunity to enhance soil organic matter with grazing integration, but also get the number two win, which is more food, same acres of land, different commodity price, diversification of farming enterprise. It may not be that the farmer owns those animals, it may not be, but we're learning a lot about compaction. We're learning a lot about ungulate hooves. We're learning a lot about soil microbial populations and how they kind of will upregulate in the presence of manure and urine and the ungulate hoof. And so I think there's tons of opportunity in that space, and to really begin to integrate animal agriculture and feed more than just a transaction, right, as a commodity purchase, but really to integrate that for our consumers and in the food system more broadly.
Great. Well, Matt and Kim, thanks so much for being a part of the discussion today and taking on this complex topic. Carol, if you would bring up the last slide, then I will work to close us out. So I thought those were some really great points, Kim, that you brought to the discussion, especially there at the end, thinking about the role that the the farmer and the livestock operator themselves have within the feed industry, and that takes us down the path of thinking about sustainable sourcing and starting to open those deep closets and doors that we need to get into and explore a little bit as we think about innovation and technology coming within the feed industry. So those, great insights. The real purpose of this, as I talked about from the beginning, is to begin to create awareness of our project that we're taking on with the Context Network here at iFeeder and the American Feed Industry Association. And that is our sustainability roadmap project. And I've been engaging various members of the AFIA membership and asking them for their insights and what they see the importance of this project is. I've heard from folks that this is really an important project for the industry. It's something that we need the industry to get behind. iFeeder is a foundation, so contributions are what carry our work. And so we've seen comments that this is really the industry's foundation, and we're looking for support from the animal feed industry to carry this work forward. We also know that there are opportunities. I've had members indicate that there are opportunities for the data that we potentially have within the feed industry to be used to explore and account for the environmental benefits that we can have as a feed industry itself. And to be able to help us tell that story, we need the data to do that, and we need to organize around that data. When we look at those who don't actually manufacture feed, the folks that are all tangent to the industry, sustainability is really about how we can help the industry produce more food, more feed, animal feed and pet food economically and efficiently. And so everybody has a role in this conversation. That came out in my discussions. And then the final is that, even if your organization has a strong sustainability program, it's pretty likely that some of the peers that you need data from may not. And so this, again, is about bringing the whole industry together and getting everybody on a continuous improvement path for sustainability and for the animal feed industry. So if this project sounds like something that's of interest to you and you'd like to talk more with me about it, feel free to reach out. My email and my phone number are there as well. You can also go to the website at ifeeder.org sustainability and check out the project. And so I look forward to hearing from folks and to being able to work with the industry as we get this project kicked off. So once again, thanks, Matt, and thanks, Kim, for joining us today. Thanks.
You're welcome, Laura. Thank you.